Good evening, all of you, and happy Republic Day to all of you. And
Those photographs are not.
thanks for coming. And it's great pleasure to see the students again who have just completed the course. And I welcome Mr. Happymon Jacob. And I think he needs no introduction because almost in every topic we referred his name and we quoted, and he is here to he's here with us. And today I just want to introduce about this initiative. The title Vajay Bevaja, because some of you may be thinking why this talks, and we had one more talk with Mr. Manishankar Iyer. So what I think is that the political science should not just remain limited to the domain of civil services, it should become the folklore. So that is why I thought that. And this Vajay Vivaja series we will be having, we will try that we can have at least one or two sessions in a month, and on the different topics related to, it can be on culture also, it can be on democracy, on different topics. And sometimes we would also like if you all want to participate, and because you all take a lot of time in the debating in the class, so I thought that maybe we can have one platform, because sometimes actually I find it very interesting when you debate, and I really enjoy that. So maybe this particular platform I need support of all of you, that you participate, because it's not just giving exams, we should be contributing in our own way towards the democracy. Tomorrow is a Republic Day, so we started this series as a tribute to the democracy. So that's all. So I will request Jayesh to come and introduce Happymon sir.
Professor Happymon Jacob. So I share a certain amount of personal connect with him as well, because we studied under him in national security in JNU. And Professor Happymon Jacob, true to his name, is very well known for his, more approachable nature, and somebody who is an academician has not just contributed to the field of India-Pakistan studies extensively. And this is a mark of a true academic. A true academic often sticks to his area. Now, I'll probably just take 2 minutes to explain something, which I think speaks a lot about any person. Okay. Professor Happymon Jacob has been teaching at the School of International Studies, JNU, for a long period of time. At the same point of time, he's a part of many track to diplomacy initiatives. You all keep hearing the word track to, track to, track to. What is that track to business? The part of the track to business is about bringing what? People who be involved in diplomacy or in decision making at some levels before, along with academicians, think tanks, everything together. And he's been working on India-Pakistan relations, especially on the Jammu and Kashmir issue, as well as nuclear deterrence related issue. He's part of the Center for International Politics and Disarmament, which especially looks into nuclear deterrence and disarmament related issues. And has been working on those topics for 14 years. When you work on something for 14 years, you have a lot of wisdom. You've accumulated a lot of wisdom, something that you often see in Hindu, in the articles that you keep reading. Right? So, without taking any further time, what I'm trying to say is that an academician's pursuit, something that they make, it's like the child. As Sir has recently written 2 books. Right? If you, especially, I just completed the first book, which is more of a travelogue on traveling on both the sides, the Indian Army as well as with the Pakistani Army, which fairly clearly no other Indian academician has done. Traveling on both the sides. Right? And that is something which doesn't come easily. That is something which doesn't come easy unless and until you're born with a silver spoon. That comes only when 14 years you persisted in something. Unless you're born in luteins, it won't come to you. And to reach luteins, from being a total political outsider, takes 14 years of effort. What is standing in front of you for the next 1 hour is 14 years of sheer experience. Something that you should gain from. And feel free to ask as many questions because he loves questions. So with that short introduction, we need to select a small bouquet. We just have that small, very small cell. Narushi takes the rather.
This works, right?
Yeah.
You can hear me? Thank you, Jayesh, for that excellent introduction. Although you make me look very old. You know, talking about being on both sides of the line of control, I once asked an ISI chief, not the ISI that we see on goods in India, but the other ISI, whether he's been on both sides of the line of control, and he said, not with a visa. I went with a visa, so if he expected an old man standing here like Manishankar Iyer, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I have not reached there yet. I'll soon get there, but I must say I'm very intimidated standing in front of you, amongst all of you. I don't talk to these many people. I talk to 40 students, most of whom sleep through my class, so you know. So I don't have to worry about towards the end of my class. Most of them are sleeping anyways. But I'm also intimidated by the fact that I'm talking to future policy makers in this country. I'm talking to the future IAS, IPS, IFS, and XYZ. So this is a great feeling and wonderful feeling. And thank you for inviting me here. It's a great pleasure to be here. And as Shubhra ma'am said, I think it is important for, and I've always believed that discursive spheres create knowledge. It's important to talk to people. It's important to debate. And I'm very proud of the fact that I'm in a country where it is possible, still possible, to discuss, to talk, to debate, dispute, disagree. And I think that that's the spirit of the nation. That's the spirit of being in a country like ours. And I'm very happy that I'm in this country. And I'm also happy that I'm not in a different country. You know what I'm talking about? Because sometimes you don't get to say and you're not able to say what you want. On that note, I think, how many of you have been to Pakistan? You won't be sent to Pakistan if you have not been to Pakistan, but I suppose nobody has been to Pakistan. How many of you have been to the line of control? That's quite a few. That's quite a few. I thought I was here to promote my books, but it seems I am not. I am supposed to talk and talk intelligently. That's a tall order. But what I will do is basically I'll very briefly talk about my two books on the line of control, and then go into some of the critical issues between India and Pakistan and my take on them and where I think issues stand between India and Pakistan. And as an academic, I have absolutely no policy experience and I don't wish to serve in the government. I'm a thoroughbred academic, and my only experience is from the archival research that I do and the travels that I undertake to the line of control and to Pakistan. I've been to Pakistan 10 times, and I believe seeing is believing. I think it is important for us to get an experience of that. So what I talk today is based on my travels, based on my track 2 experience, and you might wonder what track 2 is. It's when at the informal level, Indian and Pakistani interlocutors meet, especially retired generals and foreign service officers, etc. My first book, which is published by the Oxford University Press, is on ceasefire violations and India-Pakistan escalation dynamics. The argument that I'm trying to make in this book, rather I'm trying to explain why ceasefire violations take place. Can somebody tell me what is a ceasefire violation? What do you understand by a ceasefire violation? Somebody? What does a cross-border firing involve? No, what does it? When I say what does it involve, what I'm trying to understand is that what is the intensity of that? What is the extent of that? When you hear a ceasefire violation, what comes to your mind?
Sir,
Violation of an agreement, it comes to your mind. How many shots are we talking
sir,
about?
sir, it is. बोल दूं क्या?
Yep, fire away.
Sir, it is the sector-specific violations that if in one sector Indian Army fires, then in another sector where it is favorable to Pakistan Army, they fire from that side.
Fine, that's all right. What I'm trying to get at is the intensity. We often do not understand the intensity of ceasefire violations when we hear of ceasefire violation. One ceasefire violation can mean several hundred thousands of shots from a personal weapon to heavy artillery to anti-aircraft guns. All right, that's one ceasefire violation in 24 hours in a 40-kilometer sector. So 40-kilometer sector, 24 hours, several hundred thousands of shots from a personal weapon to an anti-aircraft gun. That is one ceasefire violation for you. Right, so in the year 2002, you had 5,000 violations reported by one side. Forget about what the other side reported. So do you understand the magnitude of what we are trying to say? You're talking about a humongous amount of firing that is taking place. I was deeply concerned about why ceasefire violations take place. What are the motivations behind the two armed forces to keep firing at each other? So I undertook this study. The official reasons given by India as to why ceasefire violations occur is that Pakistan army infiltrators into the Indian territory called Jammu and Kashmir, and in order to help them infiltrate, they give covering fire. That is the official Indian argument, and I of course completely disagree with that argument. In my book, the Pakistanis make the argument that the Indian armed forces fire at the Pakistanis for absolutely no rhyme or reason, in an unprovoked manner. Obviously, I disagree with that too. So my book is an endeavor to explain why ceasefire violations happen, and I argue that something called autonomous military factors are behind ceasefire violations. And when I mean, what do I mean by autonomous military factors? Things like local military dynamics. Let me give you some examples. For instance, defense construction on the line of control. You have bunkers, you have posts getting created by the two sides. According to the Karachi Agreement of 1948, which of course the MEA does not agree with because they go by the Simla Agreement of 1972. Whereas the forces on the ground, both Indian and Pakistani forces, abide by the Karachi Agreement, because the Simla Agreement, if you read the agreement, it has absolutely no details of how to manage a right. So if you look at the Simla Agreement of 1972, it has no details on how to manage a ceasefire line. So they go by the 1948 Karachi Agreement. They are not supposed to build anything within 500 yards, but they keep building. And when the building happens, the firing happens. One reason: personality traits of commanders on both sides, lack of standard operating procedures. You need to have standard operating procedures in order to man a border. You don't have them. You don't have a clarity of the line. If you go to the line of control and if you ask an army officer there, show me the line of control, they will say, do you see that tree there? It's behind that tree. Do you see that bush there? It's behind that or inside that. There is no clarity. It's a notion. So the line of control is a notion. It is not a fact on the ground. Simple. So when two notions contrast, there will be firing. No one talks about those kind of things. So you have very minute local level factors which, in my opinion, constitute at least 60 to 70% of the ceasefire violations. That's my argument number one. The second argument that I'm trying to make in my book is what happens when you have a ceasefire violation. Now, I argue that between India and Pakistan, you have conflict escalation when ceasefire violations happen. Now, the standard argument in the literature in India and in Pakistan and abroad is that escalation between India and conflict escalation between India and Pakistan happens when terrorist attacks take place. And I'm not disputing that. Yes, if Mumbai happens, if 01, 02, 2001, 2002 parliament attack happens, all of this can actually lead to conflict escalation between the two sides. I'm not disputing that. But I'm also saying that in this age, in this milieu, in a mediatized environment, it is also possible for ceasefire violations to lead to military, political, and diplomatic escalation. And in my book, I talk about 8 cases where you have had in the past from 2001 to 2018, you have had military, political, and diplomatic crisis escalation because of ceasefire violation. And this is not something that is usually argued in the literature. So in order to do that, I collected data from 2002 to 2016 on ceasefire violations, non-official data, because the official data just tells you in the year 2002 there were 500 violations. Where, when, why, they don't say that. So I collected my own data. I also constructed a data set on escalation between the two sides. I juxtaposed the two and made a connection. And I said that ceasefire violations lead to conflict escalation between the two sides. And therefore, you can't ignore this. And therefore, you got to put in place certain mechanisms in order to ensure that ceasefire violations do not break out. That is my book number 1. But I was not too happy with just doing that book. You know, there is this balance of kill argument, balance of casualties. How many did we kill on the other side? So whenever we hear of ceasefire violation, what people normally ask in the media is, did we kill more than what they killed? Who has more number? The balance of kill. The balance of kill has to be in our favor. I think that's a very dehumanizing argument. That's not how you talk about casualties. That's not how you talk about human beings. Therefore, I wrote a second book called The Line of Control, traveling with the Indian and Pakistani armies. I've been to Pakistan several times. I've been to both sides. I've been in the villages where villagers live under the flight path of mortar shells and machine gun firing. So you're looking at the Indian fence. So there is the Indian fence, and a few kilometers ahead of the Indian fence, you have the zero line. Zero line, as I said, is a national line. So between these two, you have several hundred families, several hundred villages, villagers residing in this particular space. And these people have their relatives on the other side of the zero line. And so they are the first they're the first victims of any ceasefire violations that breaks out. I wanted to bring that story into our drawing rooms, into the people that I interact with, into the people I talk to, saying that, listen, there is this human story. There is this human angle to what happens on the line of control. It is not about whether India has fired more, whether it is India has killed more on the other side. It is also about it is the actual human beings that get killed on the line of control. It is also about the men and women in uniform. And I'm talking about not just on the Indian side, also on the Pakistani side. They're as professional as an army as the Indian army is. After all, the two came from the British Indian Army, right? And they have the same customs, they have the same morals, they have the same kind of way of dealing with situations, the standard operating procedures, etc., etc. So I wanted to talk about the people. I wanted to talk about the soldiers who live under the gaze of a telescopic gun from the other side. People who live in bunkers for days together, sometimes not knowing whether they are going to be shot at in the next 1 hour or the following day. And these people tell me that we sit in a bunker, there's only a small peephole. Sometimes a gifted sniper from the other side can get me through that peephole. And I'm sort of so worried about it day in and day out. And these are the worries that we don't talk about. We said, give it back to them. Muh tod jawab denge. That's a good idea, but muh tod jawab comes from both sides. So there's a complication of that kind. So let me sort of also give you a little bit of statistics, and I'm going to sort of do that in the next 2 minutes so that you don't go to sleep. Um, Ceasefire violations. Pakistanis reported in 2015 248 violations. In 2016, they reported 382 violations. In 2017, they reported 1970. In 2018, last year, they reported 2,350. And multiply that with what I said earlier. India in 2015 reported 405. In 2018, India reported 2,140. And you're talking about the civilian casualties, 30 on the Indian side, 36 on the Pakistani side, 29 military men getting killed, etc. I also want to tell you that a little more. I'm sort of building this base for a larger point that I'm trying to make later on. Kashmiri boys joining militancy. In the year 2013, you had just 6 Kashmiri boys who took up guns against the Indian state. In the year 2014, it went up to 53. In the year 2017, that went up to 126. Last year, the figure crossed 200. So from 2013, just 6, to 2018, 200 boys picking up guns in the Kashmir Valley against the Indian state. I have statistics on infiltration, what is the kind of infiltration we are talking about. It has gone up stupendously. Terrorist violence has gone up. The amount of terrorists who are getting killed, that has gone up. Then you might wonder, what if more terrorists are getting killed today? Isn't that a good thing? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? The Indian state is able to kill more terrorists. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Why? It's a good thing. Which means you have more terrorism problem. Simple. But if you ask the government occasionally makes a big hue and cry out of it. They say, look at this. We have killed more terrorists this year. Wait a minute. That's because you have more terrorists this year. You didn't have as many terrorists last year or previous year. So the simple logic sometimes defies us. We just simply don't look at that part. Okay, so I want to sort of, with that statistical background, with that data, I want to get into the state of India-Pakistan relations, as it were. And I want to, at this point of time, I want to sort of bring to your attention the kind of negotiations that India and Pakistan had from 2004 to 2008. And I think that was the most successful India-Pakistan negotiation that ever took place. Started off between Atal Bihari Vajpayee and General Pervez Musharraf, then Pakistani dictator, and then carried on by Dr. Manmohan Singh thereafter in 2004, and by Pervez Musharraf on the other side. Several people have talked about the near deal that was achieved between the two sides on the Kashmir question. The Pakistani foreign minister, Khurshid Mahmood Kasuri, has talked about it. The Indian interlocutor with Pakistan at that point of time, Ambassador Satinder Lama, has talked about it. Even Manmohan Singh did refer to the fact that we were very close to a solution as far as Kashmir is concerned. And there's a reason why I'm focusing on the Kashmir question, because I personally believe that Kashmir is the root cause. Once you take Kashmir off the table, everything else will fall in place. Unfortunately, we just don't have the stomach to ensure that there is a solution to Kashmir. And I think people like yourselves, when you get into the government and start running the show, probably you will have the courage of conviction to do that. What was the deal at that point of time? The deal, of course, was based on what Musharraf had said, the 4-point formula. What did the 4-point Musharraf formula involve? It involved resolving the Kashmir question without changing the borders in Kashmir. That is a very, very important point. Make the borders irrelevant, Manmohan Singh said, and don't change the borders. I think that's a fascinating way of putting it. The other, of course, involved demilitarization, it involved self-governance. What is self-governance? So you might wonder, oh, if the two sides of the erstwhile princely state of Jammu and Kashmir has joined mechanisms that would encroach on Indian sovereignty. No, it doesn't. All it does is basically that you will probably have a joint mechanism for watershed management, joint mechanism for glacial management, etc. That's a good thing. So if two sides can do it, and if that resolves Jammu and Kashmir, that's absolutely perfect. But unfortunately, today there seems to be no appetite for the Manmohan Singh Musharraf formula. I was in Rawalpindi, and Rawalpindi, as you know, is famous for the GHQ, the general headquarters of the Pakistan Army, and I managed to meet the second in command of the Pakistan Army, the Chief of General Staff, Bilal Akbar. And so I sort of ran this past him. I ran this past him and asked him, "Do you think Musharraf formula has any future?" So he looked at me for a moment and said that every idea has a time, and the idea for the Musharraf formula probably has passed. And I was very, very unhappy to hear that. Although I think that that is probably not the inside thinking within the Pakistan Army, and I have reason to say so, and I'll come to that in a minute. Even back in India, forget about talking about the Manmohan Singh Musharraf formula. If you talk about Kashmir, you'll probably have unwanted visitors. You know who I'm talking about. So people are very cagey about talking about Kashmir, about resolving issues with Pakistan at this point of time. Unfortunately, it has become an electoral issue in India. Now let me go back to why the Musharraf formula failed. And I think one of the reasons why the Manmohan Singh Musharraf formula failed was because General Pervez Musharraf, as you know already, General Pervez Musharraf started losing his legitimacy, domestic legitimacy within Pakistan. The lawyers' agitation and all the rest that happened in Pakistan simply ensured that he didn't have the support of his own men. Again, in one of the track 2 meetings, I happened to meet a senior Pakistani official. I won't take his name because of Chatham House rules. Chatham House rules demand that you don't take the names of people from a track 2 meeting. So, this senior officer said that yeah, Musharraf was on his own trip. He did not consult any of us. So it was his brainchild. He went ahead with it. We didn't have anything to do with that. That is probably one convenient way of not addressing the real issue of the Kashmir at that point of time. The Congress party in India was also developing cold feet. Remember, in 2009, they had to go into general elections, and they were very cagey about doing anything politically sensitive. Mrs. Gandhi was very clear about not taking any revolutionary steps as far as any foreign policy issue was concerned. Probably the nuclear deal was the only thing that Manmohan Singh could sort of really push his way through. Thank God he did. And Manmohan Singh, by all accounts, was supposed to visit Pakistan in February, March of 2007 and finalize what was at that point of time called a non-paper between India and Pakistan. A non-paper is an unsigned agreement. So you had a lot of back-channel negotiations that happened between the two sides, the two interlocutors, Sartaj Aziz on the Pakistani side and Satinder Lamba on the Indian side. They used to meet in various European and Asian capitals, Bangkok to Dubai to Copenhagen and various places. And they also reached out to people like Mirwais Umar Farooq and all of these people in Jammu and Kashmir. So they had a non-paper. A non-paper, as I said, is not an agreement, but very close to an agreement. So that non-paper was in existence, and Manmohan Singh was supposed to travel to Pakistan and sign that. Unfortunately, he did not go, and his reason is that, well, I mean, Musharraf was losing his legitimacy in Pakistan, but Musharraf is still, who lives in Dubai, by the way, is still very bitter about the fact that Manmohan Singh did not make that trip to Pakistan. Then, of course, things started going wrong in 2008. You had the Kabul embassy bombing in 2008, and then, of course, the Big Bang in Mumbai, the 26/11 and that completely derailed every process that India and Pakistan had between them, going between them. Things between India and Pakistan have not been the same since 2008. That is more than 10 years, more than a decade. Things are just not the same. So the impact of 2611 has been so massive that we have not been able to revive the composite dialogue that India and Pakistan had going between the two sides. 8 baskets of issues, etc., etc. You can read up on that. So the negotiations that were going on, these things have not revived ever since. But more importantly, I think the public has been so seriously affected by the memories of 2611 that there is an aversion to anything Pakistan at this point of time. There's an absolute aversion in India about talking to Pakistan, about a peace offer from Pakistan. Even if Imran Khan today offers peace with India, there is this tendency in India that no, they're trying to trap us into something. Let's not go for this. So in one sense, therefore, I would say that the Mumbai attack did not just rupture the relationship between India and Pakistan, but undid everything that was achieved before 2008. It was a defining moment. It continues to sort of haunt our memories until this day. Not just the public memory, even for diplomats, politicians, everyone talks about 2611. And one of the reasons why that, in my opinion, is happening is because the lack of a closure of the Mumbai terror attack has, I think, deeply affected the Indian psyche. Lack of a closure, meaning that the trial that is happening in Pakistan on the Mumbai trials is in many ways a sham. You have had many of the accused, the trial to convict the perpetrators of the Mumbai attacks has not gone anywhere. The witnesses are not turning up, the judges get transferred, and the accused have been roaming free and making political parties in Pakistan, like Hafiz Saeed, for instance. So I think that has really affected the Indian collective psyche in many ways. It has now become part of the election campaign in India. Pakistan has become a domestic issue. It is no more a foreign policy issue. I think that is a major problem in the process of resolving the India-Pakistan issues. It is no more a foreign policy issue, say like India-Russia relations or India-Iran relations, India-United States to a great extent. These are foreign policy issues. These are strategic issues. Pakistan is not. Pakistan is our intimate enemy. It is a domestic problem. Everyone talks about Pakistan in India. And back in JNU where I teach, okay, so, and there is also this feeling in India that we did not avenge the losses that we incurred in 2008. We should have struck back. And if you go back to Mr. Shiv Shankar Menon's book, Choices, you will see the phraseology that he uses. He goes on to make an argument that in future, if there is another attack on the same scale of the Mumbai attack, we should retaliate using military means. He's very clear. He's very unambiguous about that. Thank you. Much needed. All right. So since then, if you look at the graph, and I have this, I run a website called Indo-Pak Conflict Monitor. So if you look at the graph of ceasefire violations, you will see 5,000 in 2001. But that is the time when India was building this fence on the LOC with Pakistan. Before that, there was no fence. So in 2001, you had 4,000. In 2002, you had 5,000. So 5,000 ceasefire violations in the year 2002. In November 2003, we have a ceasefire agreement with Pakistan. And remember, in 2004, guess how many ceasefire violations there were? Any guesses? Wild guess. 5, 6, 7, under 10. Under 10. Forget about 1,000, my friend. You're talking about under 10 violations. So from 5,000 violations, it came down to 5 violations, 6 violations in a year. That was the impact of the ceasefire agreement of 2003. In 2009, things started picking up. In 2013, I just read out to you the data from 2013 onwards. So, from 2008 onwards, ceasefire violations increased, militant infiltration increased, local recruitment of militants increased, and several attempts have been made, were made from between 2011 and 2014 to revive the composite dialogue between India and Pakistan, but it has been a complete failure. We have not been able to revive. I'll just sort of say a few more things about what happened since 2014. Since 2014 is a major period in Indian history as far as India-Pakistan relations is concerned. Some people say history began in 2014, but that's a different matter. But but having said that, I would say that Mr. Narendra Modi began very well. I think this Prime Minister began very well on an excellent note by reaching out to Pakistan in May 2014 by inviting Nawaz Sharif and other prime ministers to come for the swearing-in ceremony. I was all for it. In December 2015, he made an unannounced impromptu visit to Lahore, which many Pakistanis today dismiss as, वो तो शादी के लिए आए थे. But so what? He came for a marriage or whatever he came for, but he did go to Lahore. And he took brickbats from India. There were critiques of Mr. Modi in India who said he should not have gone to Pakistan. And I, for one, argued about it, talked about it. I said Mr. Modi did the right thing by going to Pakistan. It takes statesmanship to resolve serious issues of that kind. Even the attack on Pathankot, on that sensitive air base in January 2016, did not dissuade Mr. Modi. Mr. Modi, what did he do after the Pathankot attack took place in 2016? He said, all right, there has been a terrorist attack. Now let us have a joint investigation into the Pathankot terrorist attack. Let a team from Pakistan come to Pathankot, inspect what happened here, and then we will send an NIA team, National Investigation Team, into Pakistan. The Pakistanis did what they had to, which is they sent a team with, of course, ISI officers in that team. They visited, they took notes, went back. The return invitation never came. So to my mind, that was a terrible thing for the Pakistanis to have done. And I keep telling them whenever I see them, they said, yeah, it's true. I mean, some scheduling problem, whatever. But that's all nonsense. They didn't invite. That's a reality. And then you had so Modi reached out. He began well, but at some level, he started realizing that there is nothing that is coming out of this dialogue process with Pakistan, and he went to the other extreme. Now he is on the other extreme. So from this extreme to the other extreme, but statesmanship is about middle ground. That is something that I think this government has failed to understand. So there is absolutely no appetite in Delhi for any negotiation with Pakistan, which I think personally is a very unfortunate thing to do. The reason is that if you have a successful Pakistan policy, you won't gain any votes. Yeah, I resolved the Sir Creek dispute with Pakistan. Now vote for me. People will say take a walk. I mean, who is going to give you votes for resolving the Sir Creek or the Siachen? No. But if your Pakistan policy fails, you will lose votes. So success of foreign policy in India doesn't get you votes. Foreign policy failures will lose you votes. Mr. Modi has understood that very well. I think that is a tragedy of all of this in many ways. So two things in 2016 turned the tide, or sort of converted Modi to the other extreme. One was the July 2016 killing of Burhan Wani, the militant, called a terrorist, Burhan Wani in Kashmir, and the support that the Pakistanis gave to the militancy in Jammu and Kashmir, and the infiltration started going up. So that was one. So one is the non-invitation for the NIA return visit to Pakistan. The second is the killing of Burhan Wani. And then, of course, you had the Uri attack in September 2016, followed by, soon thereafter, you had the so-called surgical strikes. So things have never been the same thereafter, clearly. Things have been on a downward spiral. All right, so what does it tell about crisis management? Now that we have, and that's exactly what I'm trying to get at in my book. And I think the problem with what happens on the LOC is that it doesn't remain on the LOC. You believe that, many people say, many politicians and senior army officers say, yeah, there are small things, say, chut fut chalta rehta hai. These things that happen on this line of control doesn't make much of a difference. Thoda vending hone do. You must enjoy it. I'm a Madrasi speaking Hindi, you see. So, some bending on the line of control is important because that takes out the anger and the angst and the fury. It's all right. Let that continue. Let the water continue to boil. Let it not boil over beyond a point. That is the argument at this point of time in the policy making circles. Whoever I talk about the enormity of ceasefire violations, it's okay. It's okay. I mean, things happen on the line of control. It's all right. I don't think that is all right. And I've shown in my book that at least on 8 occasions, we were so very close to a breakdown, a military escalation, diplomatic escalation, and political escalation. So in an age of 24/7 media, what happens on the line of control does not remain on the line of control, and hence this argument that let things boil over a bit, that's a vending mechanism, is absolutely wrong. So what happens if so the argument is, therefore, if what happens when ceasefire violations or say terror attacks, that's the argument that we normally use, right, lead to escalation between India and Pakistan, what happens then? Is crisis management possible today? So you had a Kargil, you had 01, 02, you had a Mumbai. During all these crises, we had a certain back channel happening. You had a certain negotiations happening. During the height of the Kargil war, remember, we had a back channel happening between India and Pakistan. A back channel negotiation was happening between India and Pakistan. So today there seems to be no, and I could be wrong from what I know, there seems to be no crisis management mechanism between India and Pakistan today. The national security advisor level talks do not happen. Remember, they met in Bangkok on the Christmas Eve, and then they used to call each other, Janjua and Mr. Dowal. That talks do not happen anymore simply because there is no national security advisor in Pakistan as of today. So that is one problem. There is also no back channel happening. Now, what is meant by a back channel negotiation? Back channel negotiation is when you have, so there is a track 1 diplomacy, which is basically when you have high commissioners, you have diplomats talking to each other, that's track 1. Then you have a back channel. A back channel is when officials or people who are officially appointed by the two sides talk behind the curtain. They don't talk openly, they don't talk behind the curtain. That's a back channel. Then you have track 2 diplomacy. The retired ones who are sitting at home doing nothing much. Take some of us who are again doing nothing much. To go to a third country location, Bangkok, nice place, or Dubai, and they have a discussion on these things. And we go back to each other's countries and we pretend to feed things into, sometimes we do, into the official circles, etc. So there is also called track 2 diplomacy. Now, at this point of time, India does not want to have a back channel with Pakistan. So you don't have the NSA level talks happening. You don't have the back channel happening. So there is no crisis management mechanism at this point of time. You don't have, for example, the DGMO level talks happening. Director General of Military Operations, they talk to each other on the phone every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Now, the problem with that talk is that sometimes it is not they who are talking. Sometimes the juniors talk to each other. They just talk for 5 minutes and say, "Acha, tum yahan pe firing shuru kiye, usko band kar lo, and we will stop it there." That just talk happens. They haven't met since December 2013. So there has been no physical meeting between the two Directors General of Military Operations since December 2013. That's an excellent mechanism for crisis management. That is not in place. In 2008, when we had the tension after the 26/11 attacks, Washington DC played a major role in diffusing the tension. India may not want to admit that. In 2001-02, Washington played again a major role after the Parliament attack. Kargil, you certainly know how Clinton played a major role In fact, even China played some role in during the Kargil, after the Kargil crisis, as a sort of mediator. Today, with Trump in Washington, you never know what he is going to do or what he is not going to do. There's no clarity on what kind of assistance will the Americans offer, and if the Americans actually offer assistance, will the Pakistanis actually buy that assistance? There is no relationship that's the relationship between Pakistan and Washington seems to have sort of frozen for most practical purposes. And if China offers mediation, will India accept it? Unlikely. So you're looking at crisis de-escalation is a major challenge today at this point of time. And with the kind of firing that takes place on the LOC, with the kind of insurgency that is happening in Kashmir today, and the elections so close, 3-4 months from now, if something really goes wrong, then you may have surgical strikes plus or even more than that. And in the age of media, this is very difficult to contain that. So, just want to make a few more points about regional arms race and escalation dangers. Arms race. Obviously, we had the nuclear tests in 1998, and the understanding at that point of time was that what is the argument about nuclear stability? The argument about nuclear stability or deterrence is that once you have nuclear weapons, this brings in a certain amount of central stability between the two adversaries who have nuclear weapons. Because if you have nuclear weapons and if you have second strike capability, I simply can't attack you. There's a certain amount of stability. Then there is a problem. The problem is called the stability instability paradox. And stability instability paradox is that you have stability at the top level, at the central level, that sort of creates conditions for lower level instability. So you can have sub-conventional warfare, like infiltration of militants or small levels of war fighting, etc., etc. And that is exactly what Pakistan did in the Kargil Heights in 1999. They made use of the nuclear umbrella to undertake a small operation, which eventually went out of control. They only wanted to capture a few posts, but really it went out of control. You captured a few posts, then you saw a few more, you went there, so it eventually became a big operation. And I argue again in my book that in 2001, India was about to carry out what was called Operation Kabaddi. And Operation Kabaddi would have been far larger than any offensive peacetime military operation that India would have ever carried out. But of course, India did not carry that out simply because of 9/11 and all that. So you had the hope that nuclear weapons would give about certain amount of stability. That did not happen. Kargil proved that. And in 2002-2003, after the parliament attack, when India amassed several hundreds of thousands of troops on the line of control and the international border with Pakistan after the Indian parliament was attacked, India realized that it simply could not carry out any or take any punitive step vis-a-vis Pakistan. Why? Because you carry out a punitive step by a conventional strike against Pakistan, Pakistan was threatening to use nuclear weapons. So now that's a problem. So what happens then? So India said, all right, we will create what is called the cold start strategy. That is basically that we'll give within 48 hours we will mobilize integrated battle groups and move into Pakistan in a blitzkrieg manner and sort of carry out a shallow incursion and take a small sliver of land from Pakistan and then negotiate on the basis of that later. Now, what is Pakistan's response to that? Pakistan's response to that is called TNWs, tactical nuclear weapons or battlefield nuclear weapons. You create 2 kiloton weapons or 1 kiloton weapon or 3 kiloton weapon. Normally the nuclear weapons are about, say, at least 50 kiloton, right? I mean, if you want bust, say, Islamabad, you get a 50 kiloton weapon. But you're talking about 2 kiloton weapon, 3 kiloton weapon. You sort of put that in a on the 60 kilometers from the line of control or the international border, and you sort of mount it on the Nasir missile, which is 60 kilometers of range, and so the moment you come in, there you come into my territory. You come in, I will use it against you. So there goes the Indian cold start for S6. So we don't know whether Pakistan is bluffing or not. So there's a nuclear bluff involved here. That there is a possibility of a terrorist attack. India has to respond. India could not respond earlier. Now India is talking about responding using cold start, to which Pakistan says that we will use tactical nuclear weapons. So India has now gone ahead with other technological solutions, for example, the BMD. I often talk of BMW, but this is BMD, ballistic missile defense. Ballistic missile defense, the DRDO has been developing the ballistic missile defense system, which basically takes care of two of your cities, Mumbai and Delhi, that your command and control in Delhi will be safe and secure. So Pakistan may carry out an attack, but even if Pakistan carries out an attack, your command and control will be safe and sound, and therefore India went ahead. India has gone ahead with that in order to discourage India from continuing with that. What has Pakistan done? Pakistan has done what is called mirving of its missiles. Um, MIRVs, which means you mount several warheads on one missile. Say 10 warheads on one missile and 10 decoys on another missile, on the same missile. So you have 20 warheads coming at you, say 3 missiles coming at you. So you have 60 missiles, 60 warheads coming at you, 30 of which are decoys, darts, they have no nuclear weapons in that. 30 of which have nuclear weapons. So if you have that is coming at you, your air defense systems and your BMWs, right? BMDs will not be able to withstand against that. So that is the logic that Pakistan is using. So and some people say that this has had an impact on India's nuclear doctrine. I was talking to the other day this friend of mine, Vipin Narang from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, not Maharashtra Institute of Technology, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So this gentleman says he's just written an excellent article. I think it's going to come out soon in the journal called International Security, and he calls it India's counterforce temptations. So that India is now preparing for a counterforce strike against Pakistan. What is a counterforce as opposed to a counter value? A counter value strike means you are taking out cities, right? City is a valuable thing. So it's a counterforce strike. That's India's doctrine, no first use doctrine. The 2003 nuclear doctrine of India talks about counter value strikes, where he says India's technological solutions and innovations today are actually moving towards a counter force strike, which means it will seek out Pakistani nuclear weapons and delivery mechanisms in various parts of Pakistan and sort of take them out. So Pakistanis will not be able to attack India with their nuclear weapons. That's where India is going, is what maybe Narang is arguing. I tend to disagree with that, but at least that's the argument that he is trying to make. And he's quoting people like Shivashankar Menon, he's quoting people like General B.S. Nagal, who used to be the Indian Strategic Forces commander, etc. But more importantly, there is this arms race happening within the Southern Asian region. You have China there, and what you have for Pakistan is not enough for China, right? And what you have for China is too much for Pakistan. But Pakistan doesn't realize that. It says, oh, India is doing this, but India is doing this for a different purpose. And China looks at India and says, wait a minute, we are doing it for the Americans, not for you guys. But that doesn't make us sleep easy. So Americans, Russians, and Chinese are investing in what is called hypersonic missiles now, hypersonic glide vehicles. And hypersonic missiles are far faster than a normal ICBM, for instance. And the trajectory is not ballistic, it is cruise. And since it is cruise, it's terrain hugging, it's too difficult to detect those missiles until they are so close to you. And they're so quick. And if you marry them with nuclear warheads, it's going to be dangerously explosive. So the Americans are investing it, the Russians are investing it, the Chinese are investing it. Probably India will follow suit. We don't know what Pakistan will do thereafter. So you have all kinds of new technological solutions, and the various countries are talking about adopting these things in the absence of any arms control or nuclear dialogue between India and China. China does not even recognize India as a nuclear weapon state. It says, you guys don't matter to us. That's a standard Chinese argument. India and China does not have a nuclear dialogue. India and Pakistan at this point of time, since 2014, does not have a nuclear dialogue. They used to have what is called a dialogue at the MEA, MFA level. That does not happen anymore. Remember, Even at the height of the Cold War in the 1960s, the Soviet Union and the United States used to have all these talks, START, SALT, CFP, all kinds of talks they used to have. We don't have that. We seem to think that deterrence will come into play automatically. It doesn't happen that way. Hope cannot be your national security strategy, can that be? No, hope cannot be. You got to sort of work on a national security strategy. We think सब ठीक हो जाएगा. That's our national security strategy. खुदा करे कुछ नहीं होगा. In Pakistan they will say inshallah we will do things. Come on, guys, wake up and write down a proper national security strategy. Talk to the other guys. Come together. That's how you make national security and foreign policy. I will take a few more minutes just to run you through. How much time do I have?
As you wish.
Good, good. For once, I'm liking the sound of my own voice. Okay, so the I'll run you through some of the outstanding issues between India and Pakistan and tell you where I think what I think is the status of those issues, the state of play on those issues. Let's take Jammu and Kashmir. As far as Pakistan is concerned, there can be no talks with India without talking about Jammu and Kashmir. So they're very clear. The central is the entire India-Pakistan problem is Kashmir centric, and we will not talk to you unless and until you talk about Jammu and Kashmir. As far as India is concerned, talking to Pakistan about Jammu and Kashmir is domestically costly. There are audience costs attached to talking about Kashmir, and therefore India does not want to talk to Pakistan about Kashmir. India should at least talk to Pakistan about POK. India probably doesn't even want to do that anyway. So the post 1998, as I said earlier, we had this excellent back channel happening between India and Pakistan on the Kashmir question. But after 2008, we have not had a consistent dialogue on the Kashmir question. That seems to be buried somewhere. As I said earlier, the only way to resurrect that, in my opinion, is the Manmohan Singh and Musharraf formula. Let me draw your attention to something that I think is equally important, which is border management. Now, we sitting in Delhi, Mumbai, Pune, we think that border management is hunky-dory. It's there's nothing that one is to worry about. But let me tell you something. What is the ceasefire agreement of 2003? Can somebody tell me? What is the ceasefire? What is the nature of the ceasefire agreement of 2003? Between who? Very close. The two directors general of military operations spoke on the phone on 23rd November 2003, and they agreed to cease fire in Jammu and Kashmir. You have over 1,000 kilometers of border in Jammu and Kashmir, including the international border in the Jammu sector and the line of control in the Kashmir sector. Pakistan calls the international border working boundary. Pakistan calls it the working boundary simply because when you stand in Pakistan and looks at Jammu and Kashmir, looks at the Indian side, it is Jammu and Kashmir. So therefore, for them, it is not settled. It's working boundary. When you stand on the Indian side and look at the other side, what you see is Sialkot, which is Punjab. What you see is Punjab actually. Therefore, you call it the international border. It's not working boundary for you. So hence the difference in the phraseology. So you have 1,000 kilometers, which with the management of which rests on a telephone conversation. There are no written down documents, no principles, no norms, no do's, no don'ts, no standard operating procedures on how to manage that border. Point number one. Point number two, you might go to Punjab, Rajasthan, and I traveled the entire stretch of the border with the BSF in 2016. And if you travel from Punjab, Rajasthan, Gujarat, you will see the border is pretty peaceful. Sure. But do you have an agreement to manage this border? No, you don't have. Well, there is an agreement called the 1961 Ground Rules Agreement. The Ground Rules Agreement of 1961 is what the BSF on the Indian side and the Pakistan Rangers on the Pakistani side use to manage their border, except that the MEA does not recognize the 1961 ground rules. The MHA does not recognize the 1961 ground rules. The BSF chaps recognize it simply because It is not the IFS officers and the IAS officers who man the border, right? It's the BS officers who have to man the border, and they unfortunately have to have standard mechanisms, standard operating procedures and mechanisms. So we still have not finalized, and since 1961 we have been discussing the contours of a ground rules agreement. We still have not finalized. That's the state of negotiations on that is on as far as that is concerned. And as I said earlier, there is no clarity whether or not we should go with the Karachi agreement or the Simla agreement on the line of control in Jammu. No idea. So this is a complete mess as far as border management is concerned. And in that mess get caught the villagers who are living astride the line of control. And the men who have to manage these borders, who get killed every now and then. Let's take the question of the Sir Creek, and I think that is the lowest hanging fruit between India and Pakistan, ready to be plucked. So, if the Indian and Pakistani side want to have an opening as far as conflict resolution is concerned, the way to go about is to look at the Sir Creek conflict between India and Pakistan, which is in the Bhuj region in Gujarat. It is a small sort of water body. There is no finalization. India wants the agreement to have an understanding that the boundary lies in the middle of the water body. Pakistan wants it up to the Indian border. As far as Sir Creek is concerned, both the sides have carried out surveys there, the survey of Pakistan and the survey of India. The BSF and the Rangers have talked about it. They have an agreement in place. At this point of time, although Pakistan does not abide by the middle lane, as it is called, the Talvik principle, yes. So you have the middle lane of the water body. They abide by that. So why not formalize it? All you need to do is to formalize that, and that has not unfortunately taken place. So that is as far as Sir Creek is concerned. In the 1990s, there used to be a lot of enthusiasm on the Siachen question, right? So at that point of time, in fact, when Rajiv Gandhi went to Pakistan in the late 1980s, they issued a press statement, and I have a copy of the press statement, which says that we are asking both the armed forces to finalize the Siachen agreement along a certain lines, which is demilitarization of the Siachen Glacier. That was the understanding. And then Vora, the former governor of Jammu and Kashmir, in 1992, when he was the defense secretary, there was this agreement again to demilitarize the Siachen Glacier. All that has gone completely under the water because India today, Indian Army does not want to withdraw from the Siachen Glacier. The argument is that we are sitting at a very dominant position, geographically dominant position in the Siachen Glacier, and there is no need for withdrawal from the Siachen Glacier. What is India worried about? India used to be worried about. India used to be worried that if we withdraw from the Siachen Glacier, Pakistan will do to us what we did to them in 1984. And what did we do to them in 1984? Called Operation Meghdoot, right? So in Operation Meghdoot, India went up to Siachen Glacier and captured the territory and has been sitting there ever since. And hasn't come down. So there have been negotiations about demilitarization. And I mean, if somebody asks me a question, I can go into the details of that. But at this point of time, the Indian Army is not keen on withdrawing from that. So there is no deal on Siachen either. Okay, on the question of trade, a World Bank report recently said that the trade potential between India and Pakistan is about $34 billion, $37 billion actually. And at this point of time, it is $2 billion. In 2013, from 2011 onwards, we had 6 rounds of comprehensive talks on the trade issue. And we were very close to resolving issues. In fact, I think Anand Sharma was the commerce minister at that point of time who went to Pakistan. Dastikar Khan used to be their trade minister in that period. The Pakistanis make the argument that we were very close to an agreement, and we wanted to give India the MFN status, most favored nation status. But unfortunately, the incoming Indian government sent a message to Pakistan saying that, wait a minute, don't do it now, not under the UPA regime. We are coming to power, and when we come to power, we'll do it. Didn't happen thereafter. That, at least that is the Pakistani narrative. The Indian narrative is that we have already given them the MFN status, but they haven't given us the MFN status. Probably there is a problem when you translate that into Urdu, they say. Try translating it. Anyway, since then, the Pakistanis make the argument that, hey, you have a lot of non-tariff barriers. It is not just the tariff, main tariff that is the issue, but it's non-tariff barriers that is adversely impacting the India-Pakistan trade. In any case, we have very little trade happening between India and Pakistan. All the trade is actually happening via Dubai and other places, and a lot of people are making money out of that. The question of terrorism is, for the Indian side, that is the biggest issue as far as India-Pakistan relations is concerned. For Pakistan, it is Jammu and Kashmir. For India, it is terrorism. There seems to be, of course, Pakistani state has to act on this. So when I was in POK, I met this lady commissioner who is the refugee commissioner in POK, and I asked her about, or do you have Kashmiris living here? She said, yeah, we have them in the camps. I said, so do these people go back and forth? She said, of course, they're Kashmiris, they can go wherever they want. To me, that suggested something. So, if they're Kashmiris living in camps in POK, and if they can go back and forth, that is telling you something about what is probably happening. And the point that I'm trying to make is that there is a problem of terrorism. That is the elephant in the room, and that needs to be addressed. For the Pakistani side, they won't tell you this openly, but they will tell you in a very subtle, indirect way that the moment we stop it, he will stop talking about Kashmir. The only way we can push you to do something about Kashmir is by probably keeping the water boiling at a certain level. So I think if there has to be some sort of a conversation about the issue of terrorism, two things have to happen. One, India has to talk to Pakistan on Kashmir, and secondly, you can't have the situation in Jammu and Kashmir boiling over every day. With an active insurgency in Jammu and Kashmir, there is no way that you're going to solve the Kashmir issue with Pakistan. The moment you solve your problem in Kashmir, it's a domestic problem to start with. The moment you solve the problem in Jammu and Kashmir, I think the Pakistan angle can be managed. At least that's my belief. Or the moment you talk to Pakistan on Kashmir, terrorism will come down. Take 2004 to 2008 as a test case. If you look at the period from 2004 to 2008, when you had a fruitful, result-oriented discussion between India and Pakistan on the Kashmir question, terrorist infiltration came down drastically. That is a template to use. You want to talk about Kashmir, terrorism will come down. So we used to have what is called a joint India-Pakistan anti-terror mechanism. Of course, it did not work for too long. It was set up in 2006 called the India-Pakistan Joint Anti-Terrorism Mechanism. It died a natural death, of course, after the 26/11 attacks. There have been some discussions in 2016 between General Janjua, the Pakistani NSA, and the Indian NSA, Mr. Doval, on some sort of joint cooperation, as far as some sort of cooperation on the issue of terrorism. There was the Shanghai Cooperation Organization joint counter-terrorism drill that India and Pakistan participated, but beyond that, we haven't gone ahead as far as joint mechanism is concerned. The Indian argument is simple. It's a Pakistani problem. Why should we join you in fighting as far as terrorism is concerned? You need to stop that in your own territory. But I am not convinced by the argument that every terrorist attack is clearly centrally choreographed by the Pakistani state, and that takes place on the Indian territory. I think the truth is more complex than that. On the one hand, you have had attacks against Mr. Musharraf, General Musharraf himself on the Pakistani territory. Secondly, you have a situation happening in Jammu and Kashmir, and you have increasing number of educated young boys taking up arms. And these guys are not joining militancy from madrasas, mind you. They are joining the ranks of militancy from engineering colleges, the universities and institutions. They are not going from others. In fact, the madrasa kids are not even joining. So I think we need to take that thing out of our mind that, some kind of Islamic education makes them terrorists. No, it doesn't work that way. The truth is more complex than that. Anyway, let me move on. And here is my assessment of the situation. I'll stop with my assessment. And assessment number one, I think there is a deep-seated revisionist agenda in the Pakistani state in the scheme of things. Pakistan has a very revisionist motivation. They are not the status quo power in the region. India is a status quo power. So there is a clash between status quoism and revisionism. Pakistan is a revisionist state. India is a status quo state. Pakistan is unhappy with the South Asian regional order. It is uneasy with the Indian domination in the region. It wants to redraw the borders, especially in Kashmir. India, on the other hand, wants no change in policy. It is happy with the status quo. On Kashmir, there's no need to talk about Kashmir. So our status quoism has become so deep-rooted that we are simply we're not even willing to talk about things. That's the extent of our status quoism. So there are no innovative solutions coming from the Indian side. So the question is, can Pakistan be persuaded to do something about its or modify its revisionist agenda? And can India be persuaded to modify its status quo agenda? The second assessment that I want to make is about the lack of incrementalism. We keep saying that whenever there is an India-Pakistan negotiation, people keep saying that there is trust deficit between India and Pakistan. And because there is trust deficit, we can't move on this. We are waiting for trust to build. We're waiting for falling in love with Pakistan before anything can be done. You don't need to do that. Standard literature on conflict resolution tells you that incrementalism is the best way to achieve peace. You build, there are building blocks that you have to keep one on top of the other. So be it on Siachen, be it on Sir Creek, be it on Kashmir, you need to reach a certain point and then move on, don't go back. We are busy going back. There is absolutely no investment in incrementalism. We are so focused on building trust. And even when you build trust, people will say, but I don't trust that guy. I don't trust this guy. Until now, we were talking about what's the point of talking to Pakistan? The army rules Pakistan. When Imran Khan came to power, what was the argument? क्या फायदा है? तो army का बंदा है. Come on, you can't have the cake and eat it too. If you think that the Pakistan army runs Pakistan, this is the time to talk to Pakistan. Why? Because Imran Khan is a creation of the Pakistan army. I mean, one could make that argument. If Imran Khan is the creation of the Pakistan army, there's a single window system in Pakistan, for God's sake. Reach out to that single window system. So this is the time to reach out to Pakistan. I talked about the 2004, 2008, but let me tell you something about the Bajwa doctrine. There is no clarity on the Bajwa doctrine. What is the Bajwa doctrine? General Bajwa. Who is General Bajwa? Pakistan Army Chief. The Pakistan Army Chief has been talking about the need for regional development, reaching out to India. CPEC is changing. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is changing Pakistan. You must see to believe is the amount of buoyancy and positivity that exists in Pakistan as far as China is concerned. When I was in Pakistan in 2005, for example, for the first time, hardly any Chinese, no Chinese for that matter. Today, the malls are teeming with Chinese boys and girls and men and women. That is the amount, and so much Sinophilia in Pakistan. They think China is going to transform that country. That may be accurate. I have no issues with that. The point that I'm trying to make is that the Pakistan army believes that China is going to have a transformative effect in Pakistan. So he wants to therefore invest in creating a certain stability with India. Therefore, he wants to reach out to India. Therefore, he wants to revive the dialogue process with India. This is something that every Pakistan army officer that I met in Pakistan reiterates. And in several track tours that I've been to, This retired Pakistani military officials keep saying that our side is willing to talk. Our side is willing to talk. So, should we talk to the Pakistan army or not is the moot question. Remember, Pakistan Army Chief Bajwa is close to the Pakistani Prime Minister, Mr. Imran Khan, and Bajwa's term ends in December this year. He is most likely to get an extension for one more year at least. So you have 2 years. So once the elections are over in May, that is probably the right time to pick up the threads of negotiations with the Pakistani side. Put the things together. You have the Bajwa doctrine, you have a single window system in Pakistan, you have the Chinese influence. China wants money. China is not concerned about who gets killed where. China wants money. So there is a certain amount of opportunity, certain kind of opportunity that is developing in the region. Can the decision makers, can the politicians in India sort of try and make use of that opportunity? I'll take 30 seconds to tell you that what needs to be done to improve India-Pakistan relations. Number one, of course, begin talks with Pakistan post-elections because there's a window of opportunity. Secondly, Kashmir has to be on the agenda, and we are losing nothing by keeping Kashmir on the agenda. Very crudely put, some people say that keep placating this dialogue with the Kashmiris and they love being in the news as far as India-Pakistan dialogue is concerned. So be it. I mean, I don't care. So far as you talk about Kashmir, because it's important to talk about Kashmir. Point number 3, you need to stabilize the line of control. And what do you need for that? You need to have at least a written down ceasefire agreement. You need to have a written down ceasefire agreement. Number 4, resume nuclear negotiations. It's called strategic dialogue. You need to resume the strategic dialogue between India and Pakistan because they are investing in, we are investing in, China is investing in what is called disruptive military technologies. Spectrum denial से लेके hypersonic weapons तक. You are looking at a completely different ball game that's going to develop in the next 10 years. Technologies that we have not even heard of. And that can lead to advertent or inadvertent escalation between the two sides. Number 5, look for the lowest hanging fruit. And in my opinion, the lowest hanging fruit is Sir Creek and trade. Number 6, bring in back channel negotiators. It is important to conduct negotiations where Arnab Goswami can't see. if Goswami see that they are talking, the talk is gone for a 6. So it is important to, seriously, it is important to have these negotiations outside the gaze of the populist media in India and Pakistan. And finally, do watch my show on the wire called National Security Conversations. Thank you, folks. Did I speak for too long?
No, it was very. They are used to minimum 2.5 hours. You covered comprehensively.
It was okay.
So,
I just wanted to be factual and just keep
Very
it.
up to the mark for this.
and you will get time to ask a lot of questions. Okay. Now that's the point of listening to an academic. You get a bird's eye view of the whole situation, perhaps, and this is a very good moment to realize the JNU is not anti-national. Right?
Only some of them are.
So, and that's the kind of academic rigor that we're talking about, in the sense that a lot of conversations need to be more nuanced rather than a just yes or no. So, we'll open the floor to questions, 3 questions at a time, so that sir can take those 3 questions. Don't fire questions. And so you can start with 3 questions at a time. We'll get you the mics. And yes, the Rajya Sabha behind also will get the chance, and so will the Lok Sabha.
Okay. So we'll have some mics there on the back also. Also, we'll probably I will have one or two questions to ask, but then we'll
Sure.
probably do it last.
Sure.
Yeah. So we'll start from the middle. Yes. And I'll come to the front also.
Hello. Uh, hello. Good evening, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. Please identify your name as well as at least your name.
Yeah.
That's
Myself, Saurabh Tripathi, and thank you for giving such a nice insight on India and Pakistan. My question to you is: it might seem to be a utopian solution, but like you said, China is very much interested in getting money. That's all what China wants. Can we intimidate, or is there any possibility like China has offered 2+1 dialogue solution to in case of Nepal? Can we have some channel like that China goes for a 2+1 dialogue with Pakistan also in case of India, like because the way we have been trying to deal with Pakistan in the conventional way, building up the you matlab, one-to-one dialogues, they have not been that much successful. If the China has a great influence on Pakistan right now, they can also be used in that way. If China also wants that India and Pakistan could get to a good solution, uh, maybe.
Well, that's one question. Can you give the mic the front? Okay. First go in the back. पीछे 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 आगे आएंगे. There's enough time. Yeah. On the back side. Yeah. Right. Right. उधर पीछे हाँ जो बुलंद हाथ है. पेपर वाला ओके टेक द पेपर वाला हाथ. Yes, yes, टेक द माइक. Yes, please identify your name and if you can stand so that somebody can see you.
Sure, sir. A very good evening to you, sir. My name is Lisa. Thank you for giving us the in-depth reality of India-Pakistan relations. So we know the roots of disturbance This is plugged in the partition which both countries had to go through in 1947. Standing today, acknowledging that you have been on both the sides and have seen things from both perspectives, I have a question for you regarding nationalism. Has Pakistan succeeded in winning nationalism in their land? Have we Indians succeeded in winning nationalism in India? And considering the diversity of India, who according to you is a perfect nationalist? As nationalism remains as nationalism remains a discourse in our PSIR classes, and you ascending from the university which is respected and looked up by all of us students, but not so much so by the government in power, because somehow today, according to them, Kanhaiya is not an Indian student but only a student of GNU. I cannot find a better person to ask this question. So may you.
Cool. Again. Now, one thing is, can you keep your questions a bit short? I mean, I get it. Yeah, it's okay. We're fine.
Sorry.
Yeah. पहले बैक वाले नाराज ना हो जाए ताकि फिर next will come to the front. Next
So
three questions.
if you permit me, like I have a writing on a perfect nationalist. So after sir is done giving his opinion, if you allow me to, may I share it with you?
Of course.
Probably.
Of course.
Yeah, sure.
After sir replies.
Yeah, sure.
Actually, your question was very good. Very good question. I really liked it.
Okay. On the back side. One. Yeah, that's it. 3 questions from the back, 3 from the front. Fair and equal, sabka saath, sabka vikas.
Myself Jayaprakash sir.
Louder, please.
Loud. Can you hold the mic closer?
My question is on two issues. First is, had Musharraf-Manmohan formula been fructified, could India have vetoed CPEC? And my second question is regarding arms race. Is India expecting the fall of Pakistan on the lines of USSR? Because we can see in Pakistan that there's pathetic state of expenditure on socio-economic issues, and army sucks a lot of budget from the government.
Did you get the second question? Can you, yeah.
Let's reply first three questions.
Okay. No, sir did not.
I didn't get that last question.
The last question, sir is saying
Is engaging in arms race India expecting fall of Pakistan on the lines of USSR? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll first take these three questions and three from the front.
Okay, so Saurav Tripathi. I think China is the elephant in the room, both for positive and negative reasons. And China's role in the region cannot be wished away, cannot be underestimated. This is a rising superpower, and this will have implications for the region and for the world order. There is no doubt about that. And I am a firm believer. I believe in the maxim of Ronald Reagan: trust but verify. And I think it was wrong of the government of India, and I have absolutely no problem in saying so, to completely say no to CPEC. Clearly, CPEC passes through POK. But remember, there are routes that go into Central Asia via POK, and we have absolutely no problems with those Central Asian countries in sort of dealing with those Central Asian countries. So it's not the first time that anybody is talking about an international road going through POK. And I think we should have had made use of the Chinese project and said that, all right, you want to talk about CPEC, how about we talk about a road from Ladakh to Xinjiang through to Central Asia. That should have been our counter offer to China, instead of saying that we do not want to discuss this at all. So I think my feeling is that there is a rethink within India at this point, within Delhi at this point of time. Maybe we were a bit too hasty in saying no to CPEC, which is going to be a reality in any case. The reason why I say that China has a role to play, China is already playing a role in Afghanistan. China is playing a role in Pakistan. In fact, China is also trying to get trying to talk to the Baluchis in Pakistan. China is already talking to the Taliban. China is involved in peace negotiations in the region. So if India continues to say no to China and Chinese influence in the region, I think we will be left behind in many ways, number one. Number two, we keep looking at China only as a threat and as a challenge and not as an opportunity. I think that mindset needs to change. I have no Sinophilia. I can tell you that. I think China is in future going to be a challenge for India. I have no doubts in my mind about it. But remember this: if China builds roads in Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar, or ports in Sri Lanka, these are not going to be used by China alone. If there is a road in Nepal built by China, India can also use that road. It is not as if, made in China, therefore only China can use it. Roads don't function like that. If China wants to use that road for its own economic development and benefit, so can India. So I think we should encourage the Chinese infrastructure development in the region, insofar as we know that is not going to be a military threat. So if the Chinese are investing in military installations in the neighborhood, we have a right to object. But if China is engaged in peace processes, in infrastructure building for civilian purpose, I think we should encourage that. It's going to be good for us too. So it is in that context, I think, that it is important for India to use China to stabilize Pakistan to some extent. If you can't talk to Pakistan directly, use the Chinese for that matter. Diplomacy can't be so snooty. Diplomacy can't be so it has multiple avatars. When you are dealing with a complex problem, you need to have a complex negotiating strategy, which unfortunately we are still not waking up to. You need to have multiple layers of negotiations with different kinds of parties. But with 900 diplomats, In the MEA, there is only so much you can do, right? So I think we need our diplomacy needs to be far smarter, and I don't think it is a bad idea to have a trilateral, a back channel, or even a quiet trilateral summit with China and Pakistan. I think that's probably the need of the time. So I think it is important to look at the Chinese influence not just from a strategic threat point of view. You can have that net assessment as you go on, but it is also important to look at that as an opportunity. Now comes the complicated question about nationalism. I was I will I'm not a sociologist or a political scientist. I'm an IR guy. That's my way out. I'm coping out. But when I was in my book, I talk about a certain Vasant Vihar man. And this gentleman, if you have read my book, which most of you haven't, I talk about meeting a particular gentleman from the Pakistan High Commission. And I meet him in his Vasant Vihar home, and I can't take his name clearly. And in his basement, he keeps my phone away, and he says, "Okay, I'm going to turn it off. I'm keeping it away." I said, "Fine." Then he says, I said, I've been applying to go to Pakistan, the line of control, for the last 2 years. And he says, I am the guy you talk to. I'm your last, I'm the guy you have to convince. I said, fine, let's talk. Then he interviewed me for 2 hours. And in between, he asked me a question. He asked me, Tumhara line kya hai? I said, what's your angle? What do you want to do with it? What's your angle? Probably he was thinking that, I'm a loose cannon and all that kind of stuff. I said, I have the best interest of my country in mind. I have the enlightened national interest of my country in mind. I am doing it in my country's national interest. And I believe that writing on ceasefire violations, talking about peace between India and Pakistan is in the interest of my country. I said, I'm very convinced about that. For some reason, he was convinced about that too, that I am probably saying the right thing. So throughout that journey in Pakistan, whenever somebody asked me, why are you doing this? Your own government may look at you in not so, with not so much great favor. I said, that's fine. I'm doing it in my own enlightened understanding of national interest. And people sort of were convinced by that. And I think that is my understanding of nationalism, of civic nationalism, of not uniformity, but not unity. I believe in unity, not uniformity. You know what I mean? I'm a South Indian. I'm a Christian, I talk to Punjabis, Hindus, Muslims. They're all Indians. The way I look at it is that there is a constitution, there is a civic. I have an understanding of civic nationalism. I have an understanding of national interest. If I were to be a Pakistani, I've just spoken of Pakistan's national interest. Had I been a British national, I'd have talked about British national interest. I live in this country. For me, national interest promised to buy my constitution is the most important part. Now, you can have multiple nationalisms in a country like this. There is no one nationalism in this country. And trying to impose one kind of nationalism, I think, is going to be the undoing of this country. And I believe there is a Tamil nationalism, there can be a Naga nationalism, there can be a Gujarati nationalism if you want. There can be an Indian nationalism too. But you can't impose. The moment you say that this is the kind of nationalism that we need to have, I think this country is going to be in trouble in the days to come. There is only the civic nationalism is the way forward. Enlightened national interest is the way forward. And I think people like us need to sort of keep pushing that argument. It is not based on religion. It can't be based on ethnicity. Where Pakistan has got it wrong is to base its nation on religion. And I say that in my book. When I come back to India, I feel very liberated. I feel very liberated because I can be an atheist. I'm an atheist. I can be an atheist. I can talk against religion. Nothing happens to me. Yeah, maybe a few people will give me a few slaps, but I can still talk against religion. I can say Christianity is nonsense. So my mom was very unhappy when I said that I don't believe in the virginity of Mary. She was taken aback. What do you mean by that? I said, yeah, come on. I did my BA in philosophy. I can't sort of somehow live with that understanding or that faith. So, you can criticize things. That is the freedom that this country gives me. And the moment you sort of have a very extreme understanding of nationalism based on religion, based on religious dogmas or anything, I think we as a country will not be able to sustain for too long. The future of India has to be based on a strong belief in civic nationalism and constitution. The point about Manmohan Singh Musharraf formula and CPEC. No, I think if the Manmohan Singh Musharraf formula were to fructify, if that were to reach a logical conclusion, it would have led to a lot of peace and prosperity in the Kashmir region. And if Kashmir is the most important root cause of the India-Pakistan rivalry, realists would say, they would say, no, it's the balance of forces, the balance of power that is a problem. But I don't think balance of power is the most important problem with India and Pakistan. It is actually the Kashmir issue. If we have resolved this on the basis of a certain mutual understanding, I think we could have sort of looked at things like CPEC or regional development. What happened to SARC, for example? The one India-centric institution. We've sort of given it an unceremonious burial. We are so good at destroying our own institutions. We could have used the SARC. I know there's a Pakistan problem right there. That is true. Look at the way China is using institutions in the Southeast Asian region. I think there's a need to invest in regionalism. I think there's a need to invest in things of that kind, and we needn't be suspicious of everything that happens in our neighborhood. There was one last question that the gentleman there asked me.
Asking whether India wants to engage Pakistan in an arms race with US.
Right. No, I don't think that is the case. The problem with USSR was, and at some point of time, USSR had more nuclear weapons than the United States, 38,000 nuclear weapons by the late 1960s. That was a competition between the two superpowers. Here you have a different kind of competition, a cascading competition. You have the United States does something, Russia follows up, and then you have the Chinese looking at Americans and doing something else. Then you have Indians sort of react to that. The Pakistanis react. There's a cascading effect here. So I don't think India is trying to consciously engage Pakistan in a certain arms race and drive it to the ground. I don't think that is happening. And even if that were to be the case, I don't think that Pakistan will go bankrupt because of that. It is pretty robust. In fact, if you look at the economic figures in Pakistan, it's doing pretty well in the last couple of years. So it's not all that bad. I don't think that through an arms race, India can break up Pakistan. Some decision makers in India think that Balochistan will go away or KP province will go away. I think that's daydreaming. And I don't think we should invest in those kinds of daydreaming. I think we have better strategy making to engage in.
Okay, so that was kind of pretty insightful on what you just said about the Baloch question. I remember the Prime Minister saying from Red Fort,
Yep.
We're very concerned about the Baloch people. I don't know, past 2-3 years, not heard anything since then from the Red Fort. Okay, so 3 questions from the front, and how do I decide, ma'am? One.
I think you are from Kashmir.
You are the go to. Yeah, एक तो मैम कश्मीर का बनता है, Jammu and Kashmir. Yeah, somebody from Jammu, Ladakh region also can rate the land. We maintain equity here.
He represents the state of Jammu and Kashmir.
Yeah.
One person from Kashmir, other from Jammu.
One from Jammu also, okay, and one from Leh also. You are from Jammu? Okay.
From Ladakh. Punjab, Karnataka.
Okay, Kartarpur.
Jana पूछे.
Babar, if Prof from Jammu Kashmir, it is very nice that we have here a great lecture. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, man.
तो थोड़ा हाँ.
So my question is that the suggestion that you had given us, and as we have heard while giving the lectures, it is the put the Kashmir issue on the table, the Pakistan's point of view. While we put the Kashmir issue on the table, it means that we have to address the Kashmir voice. And most of the Kashmir voice is the separatist. One of their demand is that give us the autonomy. So tomorrow, if that peace talk will happen, so how we will address that time the India will address these kind of issues?
Okay. Okay. One. Jammu. Anybody from Jammu? Anybody from Jammu? You're from Jammu?
Don't push them.
Okay. So You have the mic, so you'll ask the question. That's how democracy works.
Right.
Anyways.
Good evening, sir. My name is Santosh Ambassador. Sir, there is a considerable amount of hate in Pakistan regarding the 1971 war. They blame us for like losing one part of their country. So, sir, what can we do to lessen this hate? And the second question is that a nuclear war between India and Pakistan is debilitating for both the sides, sir. So Pakistanis have said that they are willing to sign a no first use policy only if India signs a no war pact with Pakistan. So why they have shown a reluctance? And the final question is bit obvious.
Arey, bas, bas. That's it. Two is enough. Okay, just exclude. Now they've taken democracy in their hands. Totally. So, it's like, ma'am. Okay, okay. One. Can you just- Okay. Okay. Back on the back. Back, back. Back, back.
एक लोग उस साइड रहो ना
हाँ. Yes, yes, yes. You. अच्छा, अरे आपस में सुलह कर लीजिए. Just, that's it. Yeah. Just identify yourself and then ask.
You can do as much damage sitting down, so go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Hello. Thank you, sir. Thank you for such an insightful information that you gave to us. You said that from 2004 to 2008, we did not have any attacks. The number of terrorist attacks had gone down. Then why 2008? So I mean, like there are many articles that we have read regarding that. Since there were chances of some substantial agreements being made, like the one that you said, because of to negate that entire process, 2008 was carried out. So how true is that? And why 2008? That is what the basic question.
Good question. That's it. So three questions. Yeah.
Right. So, question number one about the point that Babar you made about how do we accommodate the Kashmiri voice. If the Indians and Pakistanis talk about the Kashmir issue, should the Kashmiris present themselves on the table as a third party? Well, I mean, states do not recognize non-state parties, so it is impossible for India to have the Kashmiri separatists on the table when they are negotiating. But let's take the example of what happened during the 2004-2008 period. Both Indian and Pakistani sides reached out to the Kashmiri separatists, the entire spectrum of the Kashmiri separatist leadership in Srinagar, and had back channel negotiations with them. The one holdout was the old man. But for him, but for Mr. Gilani, Ali Shah Gilani, everyone else had been reached out to and spoken to, and they were mostly on board the Musharraf formula. So I think you can't use a front channel diplomacy with non-state actors. Unfortunately, they are non-state actors. Only a sort of creative way of dealing with them can be done. And I think I would understand that. You can't have the sitting on the negotiating table when the Indian and Pakistani diplomats are negotiating. They will have to be spoken to, they will have to be talked to, the discussions will need to be organized, but that has to be done differently. That's my personal opinion. Because I don't think the MEA is going to accept that, the PMO is going to accept that. That's not how it works in modern diplomacy. 1971, absolutely. I think that's an absolutely interesting point. You talk to any Pakistani and say that, hey, India has peaceful intentions. We are not here to hurt you. We don't want to do anything with you. We just want to be a peaceful neighbor. We believe in economic development. They say, what about 1971? Well, you try and tell them because there was a humanitarian issue. You had millions of refugees coming into India. You attacked us first, actually, all of which is true. But they say, but you did train the Mukti Bahini. You did cut our country into two. In fact, that has become a very powerful force, powerful discourse in Pakistan. The last man who saw action in 1971 was Pervez Musharraf. I mean, he was the last man to have retired from the Pakistan army, from the batch that saw action in 1971. But the discourse has not disappeared entirely. Even though you have you have boys who served, boys who joined the Pakistan army after 71, in the higher echelons of the Pakistan army, the bitterness about 71 has not gone away. How do we sort of reach out to them, talk to them? It is not the Pakistani civilians that you need to talk to. It is the Pakistan army that you need to talk to. And I think it is important for the Indian and Pakistani armies to have delegations visiting both sides. The NDAs and the OTAs and the Pakistani army academies, they should host the Indian delegation. They should go back and forth. Army conferences have to be organized. I think that a lot of army to army, military to military exchange can take place. You should actually see these guys when they meet each other. If on the line of control a junior Pakistani officer meets a senior Pakistani officer, he would salute the senior Indian officer and call him Your Excellency and Sir, and vice versa. If a junior Indian officer sees a senior officer on the line of control, they salute the senior one and call him Sir or Your Excellency. That is the kind of etiquette that these people have in their midst. These are not militias. These are not people with no norms or principles. They are very well trained. They know there's a certain system of doing things in the Indian and Pakistani armies. And I think they need to be brought together. Conversations have to begin. And that's exactly why I suggested earlier that you need to have the regular meetings of the Directors General of Military Operations. I think that's one way of doing that. The nuclear war debilitating, yes, and therefore Pakistan has said, you made that point. I don't sort of necessarily believe the Pakistan argument that they will go for a no first use policy of nuclear weapons if the Indian side goes for a no war pact. I think that is basically a red herring, as it were, that, they know that India is not probably going to accept the no war pact. Why is India hesitant about accepting a no war pact with Pakistan? Because India says that what happens in Jammu and Kashmir is sub-conventional war. Now, sub-conventional war cannot be part of a no war pact. They will say, we haven't done it. We don't use proxies. So India says, well, you want to have a no war pact? Add the sub-conventional warfare into the mix, and then we have a no war pact. But it's a different matter altogether. I think both India and Pakistan should have a no war pact, should have a no first use policy of their nuclear weapons. Even the Indian no first use policy is a watered down no first policy. You know that, right? According to the Indian nuclear doctrine, India says that if India is attacked with chemical or biological weapons anywhere else in the world, or if Indian soldiers are attacked with chemical and biological weapons anywhere else in the world, the Indian no first use does not stand. Anyway, so I think therefore there is a need to discuss the no war pact argument as we go on. 2004 to 2008, that failed. Well, I think. Why did the attacks begin in 2008? I think one of the reasons was I'm not denying the argument that there are spoilers. There were spoilers at that point of time in Pakistan. Remember, even Pervez Musharraf was attacked within Pakistan itself. So there are state-controlled and non-state-controlled actors within Pakistan who carry out attacks against India and Pakistan itself. So I think there are spoilers in Pakistan who certainly do not want to see a peace process going on between India and Pakistan. But having said that, I think the Kashmir negotiations had failed by 2007, late 2007. So there was no hope of a revival of the bilateral channel on Kashmir in 2008. So I think there was a recognition in Pakistan that the Kashmir talks are not happening. So we can probably go back to square one. So I'm sort of guessing. I don't really have an answer to that, because I think that's one major reason. But more importantly, I think Babar, you'd remember we had the uprising in Kashmir in 2008. So the popular uprising in Kashmir, the Amarnath, again the Amarnath land transfer. There were these protests in J&K, and the Pakistan did sense an opportunity in 2008 of coming back to full force in Kashmir. So Three things. One, the failed talks in 2007 on Kashmir. Two, the uprising in Kashmir, which was pretty much domestically triggered in many ways. And thirdly, the spoilers in Pakistan would have taken back a certain amount of control. So I think there are several reasons why you have things picking up, starting again in the year 2008.
Thank you, sir. You've been putting in a lot of effort. Okay, just wait. One question is, sir, there's almost 600 students watching you, just a stone's throw away.
Hi.
Technology. Yeah. So there's a question from there. The growing legitimacy of Taliban. How should India fight its indecisiveness in ensuring peace and talking to Taliban? Should India use military force in Afghanistan for peace? I'll probably put down the question.
Right.
Please.
No, first of all, about Taliban. There was a time when India categorically said there is nothing called a good Taliban and the bad Taliban. That was a time. But India has come a long way since. Today, I think we are happy negotiating with various parties in Afghanistan, including the Taliban. In fact, during the recent meetings, the Indians did send observers, non-official observers, to some of the meetings, especially in Moscow. There was a recent meeting. So India has come a long way to accepting Taliban as I'm paraphrasing the Indian policy. India has not said anything along those lines, but I am confident in articulating that from say 2004, when India said there is nothing called good Taliban and bad Taliban. Today we are saying that all stakeholders have to be reached out to in Afghanistan. So I think that's a smart thing to do, because remember, one, Taliban is not a monolith. Two, Taliban is actually not from anywhere else. They are from within Afghanistan. So if they are from within Afghanistan, as our former Vice President Hamid Ansari correctly pointed out, the peace process in Afghanistan will have to be Afghan-led and Afghan
Owned.
Afghan owned and Afghan led. Absolutely. So if it is Afghan owned and Afghan led, Taliban is Afghan too. So I think you can't wish them away. Clearly, they have killed people. They have been they were anomaly in the international system. But if they are as a country, are we going to say that if Taliban comes to power in Afghanistan tomorrow, we are not going to have any talks with these people? Probably the Americans are going to have talks with them. I remember going to a track 2 meeting in Doha, and Doha is where Taliban has an office, right? And I came back and wrote in the Hindu about it, and I met with the Taliban political office in Doha, led by Mohammad Stanakzai. And Stanakzai took me to a corner and said that, remember, I don't understand why the Indians don't reach out to us. The Pakistanis reach out to us. Why do you want them to sort of deal with all the time? Why don't you guys deal with that? Of course, I was a little terrified by that. I came back and wrote about it. So when you do when you do something that you think is a little tricky, what do? You come and declare it. So there's no secret about it, right? So I don't think it is a smart strategy to avoid talking to any party. Diplomacy is about reaching out even to the devil. India using military force in Afghanistan? No, I don't think so. I think that's a bad idea. Don't go by what Trump says. The Americans might want you to send military forces to Afghanistan. That's not our job in Afghanistan. Our job is civilian in nature. Our job is reconstruction in Afghanistan. Our job is engaging in the peace process in Afghanistan. So, if India should do something, that should be in helping Afghans reconcile. So we should participate in the negotiations on be it the Murray process, be it the Istanbul process, be it the Moscow process, be it any process, any peace process. Don't let the Chinese do everything. Let the Indian diplomats engage in it too. So don't let China take all the credit for peaceful resolution of the issues in our neighborhood. Let's actively participate in it. I think it is important that we should not send forces to Afghanistan. We should send diplomats into Afghanistan, not military officers. Sure.
Yeah, actually, I had just one question that beyond what we see, exactly what is the US's approach at present towards Pakistan? Because Pakistan has a very strategic location and there will not be any big change in US's policy as far as strategic interests are concerned. So, are we slightly confused about USA's role in India and Pakistan, and to what extent right now US is shaping our or US factor in India-Pakistan relations at present? What is the real?
Ma'am, I think the American foreign policy towards the Southern Asian region is deeply confused, and I think the Americans themselves say it. When you meet some of the State Department officials or others who come for meetings in Delhi, you talk to them, they just put their hands in the air, up in the air, and say, "We don't know what Trump is doing. He will say something today, he will say something else tomorrow. He calls Pakistan names on a particular day, and a week later he will sort of go back to saying that I've had a chat with the Pakistanis that we are going to be collaborating on the question of terrorism." But I think the deep state in the United States of America, the establishment of the United States of America, realizes that Pakistan is a pivot in their Southern Asian region strategy, be it Afghanistan, be it Iran, be it the Central Asian question. Pakistan forms a key in the neighborhood. The Americans know that, and the Americans are simply, the American establishment is simply not going to withdraw from the region. Mr. Trump might say that we don't want to fight wars abroad and we don't want to have our presence abroad, but I don't think that's how it's going to work. More importantly, at a point of time when China is flexing its muscles in the neighborhood, when China is making deep inroads into Pakistan, into Afghanistan, into Saudi Arabia, into Iran, into Russia, into Central Asia, I think it will be, the American establishment knows that it is foolish of them not to proactively engage all of these parties. So I think it's a passing phenomenon of incoherence and confusion in Washington. They don't have there's a government shutdown for God's sake happening in the United States of America, thanks to Mr. Trump. And I'm sort of simplifying it, but I think there's a deep confusion in the United States of America, and at the same time, the American deep state, the American establishment knows fully well that they can't let go of the region, and they won't. And I think they will try and have a balancing act between Pakistan and between India, as they have done in the past.
So, what is actually USA's end game in India-Pakistan relations?
There are all kinds of conspiracy theories, but I am not one of those people who believe in the conspiracy theory that the Americans want India and Pakistan to fight and sell weapons to both countries. I think that's a crude sort of analysis. I believe that the Americans at this point of time truly want the two sides to resolve their outstanding issues and sort of move on. Their biggest issue is with China, and they certainly want India to help the United States of America in checking the Chinese influence in the region. Clearly, in a future conflict between India and Pakistan, the Americans will, if not militarily, at least politically, take the Indian side. The Americans, remember, in the 80s and the 90s, used to go ballistic about Kashmir, not anymore. They are very clear on the issue of terrorism in Pakistan, emanating from Pakistan. So the Americans have taken the Indian side, and I think in the days to come, if there is, I think they truly believe that it is important for India and Pakistan to sit together and bilaterally resolve their issues. I don't think they are trying to fish in troubled waters. Their bigger focus is China. I think they are looking at the larger enemy here rather than benefiting from the India-Pakistan conflict, as it were. And I think India, for United States, a stable, peaceful, prosperous India is important in the region for their own geopolitical, economic, and strategic benefits. I think there's a larger game that the deep state in the United States has, which does not go against our own grand strategy. I think the only thing that Indian state needs to be careful about is not to fall into the American desire to have India fully and completely on their side vis-a-vis China. No, I don't think India as a country should be anybody's chowkidar. I mean, Chowkidar as in Chowkidar, the real Chowkidar. So, India can't play the role of somebody's guard in South Asia. I think India has to have its own policy. India has to have a stable relationship with the United States. India also should have a stable relationship with the Chinese. India has to develop its own relationship with these countries for its own national interest on its own accord, not for bidding for somebody's interest. I have time.
Sir has time. Sir, I'll add one question. So I have I mean, just to put it historically in the narrative, as you were saying, that you have the 1998 Kandahar hijack, then you have the Kargil, then you have the parliament attack, and the BJP starts the dialogue 2003 onwards, and then Manmohan Singh takes it forward. So in this context, we have three major, not one, three major things happening, including a full, almost blown out war. And in 2008, you have another 2611. Now, herein is the question, is the nature of 2611 something very drastically different that has prevented 8 years of talks in a substantive manner? That if we have had three major things happening, 98, 99 and 2001, and you still have talks 2003 to 8, is there something more to it than meets the eye? And is the democratic or is the presence of democracy in India a challenge to peace process? Or is the absence of democracy in Pakistan a challenge to peace process? That's the question. So that's one. Yes. Madam is taking all the notes very diligently. So we'll give it to you.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for the objective analysis that you've offered. My question is, to what extent POK can be solved or status quo will remain? What are the alternatives to resolve it?
So you got the question?
No, the POK question, what was that? Sorry?
To what extent POK can be resolved or status quo will remain? What are the alternatives to resolve it?
Just one, hold on. So there's one question from the other classroom, and that is something about you've apparently written before. So the student is asking, his name is Rakibul Haq. He's asking that is it possible to have an Asian ballistic defense missile treaty as you argued in a paper in 2017 at Off the Ramp initiative? People have been reading.
Man, I should remember what I wrote. This is the problem of writing too much. You don't remember what you wrote. All right. I hope he doesn't remember as well. So at least he's not in this room. All right. So going back to this point that you made about there was 98, there was 99, there was of course 2001. What is the big difference between, say, the Kargil war, Kandahar hijack, and Mumbai? That post Mumbai we have not had any reach out between India and Pakistan. The dialogue has probably frozen in time, has been frozen in time. I think the differences are the following. One, Kandahar was, of course, the Pakistanis aided, but that was done by the Taliban in the Afghan soil. So there was a big difference between, say, what happened in Parliament or in Mumbai for that matter. Kargil, India won the Kargil war. So there is nothing to spite the Pakistanis about. We beat them. So, that's forgotten. In that sense, it's a victorious moment. 2008 was a very, very different moment. We lost so many people in the heart of India, in the economic capital. For 2 days, we just didn't know what to do. All our vulnerabilities were exposed in Mumbai in 2611. And the Pakistanis have not done anything about trying these people who were facilitating or perpetrating this terror against India. So I think that is one part of it. The feeling of victory versus the feeling of loss. That's one part of it. And secondly, I think the media has now played a big role in Mumbai and post Mumbai. The media was not that all that ballistic post Kargil. It was, Barkadat and all of that. But still, there was a feeling of victory, and the media houses were not going all that bonkers against Pakistan. But post Mumbai, things have become, in that sense, very different. But more importantly, I think the last point that you mentioned, which is the fact that we use Pakistan for domestic political mileage. I think that really breaks the back of the camel. If you continue to use Pakistan, if you continue to use Mumbai, if you continue to use Uri for your domestic political purposes, there is no way that you can treat it as a foreign policy issue. So hence, is democracy a challenge to peace process? I think democracy in India, the shape and form of the democracy that we have in India today is at this point of time a challenge to the peace process between India and Pakistan. But that is not a quintessential problem of essential problem of democracy itself. This is how democratic countries function. But I think it's a matter of time. As soon as the elections are over, because politicians are smart animals, right? I mean, they are not stupid. They're very smart people. They know how to change their tone according to the times that they are in. Based on the milieu, based on the month, they will change their tone. So I think give it time till May, June. If Mr. Modi comes back, he will probably make a visit to another Shadi in Lahore. I have no doubts about that. But there will be a peace process post elections. I have no doubts about that. I don't think. Yeah, there is. I can see what you're trying to say. Domestic politics intervening in the foreign policy of a state, but I think that's a temporary issue. On the POK question, I don't know what is the angle of that question. What's the line of that question? But as far as I'm concerned, POK and J&K are settled issues. POK is with Pakistan, and unfortunately that will remain with Pakistan. J&K is with India, and that will remain with India. All that can happen is that you can have a certain via media without changing the borders. People can go back and forth, visa-free regime. You can have an economic coordination between the two sides. I think that is the way to go rather than any military solution. Unfortunately, that's the only option that is left in my sort of opinion. Was there a last question?
Yeah.
What was that?
No, no.
Oh yeah, on the Asian ballistic missile defense agreement. The point that I was trying to make in my off the ramps essay for the Stimson Center in Washington D.C. was that what does BMD do? Ballistic Missile Defense do? Ballistic Missile Defense Treaty, as was understood during ballistic missile defenses, as was understood during the Cold War years, somehow ruptures the stability that is brought about by the nuclear weapons. Say, for example, if United States and USSR had nuclear weapons, and if they also, if one of them installed ballistic missiles on its territory, then incoming missiles can be shot down. That was the argument. And therefore, ballistic missiles removes the vulnerability part of the stability. You need to be mutually vulnerable to have certain amount of stability. So ballistic missiles negates the vulnerability part. So in the India, Pakistan, China context, and yet the Soviet Union and the United States had two locations each where they could have ballistic missiles deployed. Why? One command and control center, and the other where you have the ballistic missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles. North Dakota and Washington in the American case, and Russia and another place in the Soviet case. Sorry, Moscow and another place in the Soviet case. So I know this is jargon. That's why I was very wary of that question. So hence what happens is that you need to have two places each where you deploy ballistic missile defenses to ensure that your command and control and your missiles are safe, and then have that vulnerability in the rest of the country. So I was making the argument that India, China, and Pakistan should have a joint ABM treaty in southern Asia, where 2 or 3 locations identified by the Indians and Pakistanis and the Chinese should deploy BMD, and the rest of the country should remain vulnerable. And that vulnerability plus the ballistic missiles in 2 or 3 locations in each of these countries together would create a certain amount of stability, and that would potentially prevent the ensuing of an arms race. That was my complicated argument that I made. I continue to make that argument, but it's complicated nevertheless.
Yeah, that's definitely. Yeah, I'll give you time. I'll give you time. Don't worry. हमारा भरोसा है. There's one question from Bangalore. Okay.
10 more minutes?
Yeah, 10 more minutes. We'll just take
Yep.
probably 2 more questions.
Yep.
So one is on the one is from Bangalore. In this nuclear age, the possibility of a conventional war is low. In this context, how much is India ready for cyber warfare?
Good question.
Okay.
On this
It's coming
side,
from Bangalore, right?
right, sure,
Cyber
Bangalore,
warfare.
Bangalore, of course. So on the, I think that's an excellent question. I think it is time that India thought about and invested in some of these new military technologies, what we call the new revolution in military affairs, including the disruptive technologies, and cyber is one very, very important element in that. In November 2018, the government of India decided to set up what is called a cyber agency and a space agency. The Naresh Chandra committee, as well as the chief of the three services chiefs had recommended in 2013, I believe, to so that India should have three joint commands: Special Forces Command, Space Command, and a Cyber Command. So the recommendation was to establish three joint commands for special operations, cyber, and for space. But unfortunately, the government of India decided not to have commands, but to have agencies, a watered down form of agency, an organization called an agency. So you'll have a tri-service agency to man space, a tri-service agency to man cyber, and they will be put in place. It is not yet in place, but I think it is going to be in place in the days to come. It will have both defensive and offensive capabilities. I'm a little unhappy because I think there should have been joint commands and not agencies. Be that as it may, but at least I think India is waking up to the reality that there is a big shift in military technology around the world. And China, remember, China is a leading state, in fact, the leading state as far as some of these new military technologies are concerned. Quantum computing, 5G, wireless connectivity, hypersonic weapons. You're looking at an array of new military technologies where China is leading. I think India is waking up a little bit too late and a bit too surely, but I think in the right direction.
Okay, so last two questions. One from the gentleman. That's it. That's it. And one is from another student about Kartarpur. Okay. And what is the significance of cultural talks like Kartarpur, and where culture stands between army and economics?
Okay,
So
cool, fine. So on the Kartarpur question, I think I don't think. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think Kartarpur is a big sentiment within mainland Punjab. I think it is not really. There's not too much of a groundswell. Yeah, for sections of Punjabis it is important, but I don't think this is. Punjabis have been sort of really asking that the Kartarpur corridor should be opened. I think it's more of a confidence building measure rather than a huge religious sort of opening as far as India and Pakistan were concerned. But that does not take away from the fact that religious tourism and cultural tourism can play a huge role in reducing the mistrust between the Indians and Pakistanis. Remember, even sports tourism, for example. Remember when Pakistani players used to play for IPL teams in India, we used to shout down Dhoni and used to cheer for the Rawalpindi Express at some point of time, and he used to play for the Calcutta Knight Riders. Yes, so I think that is the way to go. Open up and get people go for back and for cultural tourism, sports tourism, religious tourism. I think that's the way to go. As far as army is concerned, the Pakistan army has certain interest in the Pakistani economy. But I think even they understand that certain amount of stability is suitable for them. I am not again one of those people who believe that Pakistan army continues to keep India as an enemy because the India bogey helps the Pakistani army to maintain a certain amount of legitimacy in Pakistan. The Pakistan army is deeply entrenched in the Pakistani system of things, its economy, its politics, and the way the country is run. In fact, there's a lot of legitimacy in Pakistan. A lot of Pakistanis think it's all right for the army to have a say in the way the country is run. So I don't think they need India beyond a point to maintain their legitimacy in Pakistan. I somehow don't buy that argument. I think it's more complex than that. Aisha Siddiqa, we were talking about Aisha Siddiqa's Military Inc. And she shows you how much the Pakistan army is entrenched in the Pakistani economic scheme of things. It doesn't need India to survive. It has enough things to, enough credibility, and it has made enough inroads into the Pakistani scheme of things to be able to continue to be what it is. It's complicated. Can democracy in Pakistan help stabilize India-Pakistan relations? Yes and no. If you look at the history of India-Pakistan relations, most of the agreements were achieved during military regimes. Be it Musharraf, be it the earlier dictators in Pakistan, the relations did improve during military rule in Pakistan. Nawaz Sharif, Benazir Bhutto, look at the earlier rulers, things had not gone that far with them simply because they always had to look over their shoulders at the army sitting behind them. So I think I'm a believer in the argument that one, empirically it is shown that whenever Pakistan army was in power in Pakistan, the relations between India and Pakistan did improve, number one. Number two, I think it is better to have a single window system. So either you have to have elite consensus within Pakistan, where you have a certain consensus between the Pakistani army and the Pakistani political parties, or Pakistani democratically elected government in Pakistan, or you should have a dictatorship. I mean, Pakistani friends don't like when I say that we'd like to have dictatorship in our country because it's better for us. But I think elite consensus in Pakistan or a single window system of a different kind is more helpful than a more chaotic, from a purely partisan, selfish interest Indian point of view. I think democracy complicates in Pakistan the India-Pakistan relations.
Okay, so that is all. We'll put an end to the questions. I understand Pakistan can go all for the whole night, right? I know it is unfair, but democracy has its shortcomings. So we really would want to thank you, firstly, sir, for your valuable time, and and uh, and in a lot of ways, I think it's been the real tribute to democracy. Just one day before the Republic Day, you could have taken out that much time. He had to adjust a lot for us. He had an interview lined up. He took out that time. We're very glad for that. And we hope to continue a long-term association with you. And ma'am, as always, who was the conceptualizer of the idea. So we'll be glad to have you. And probably we intend to see you for more lectures in the future. Thank you. Good night. Happy Republic Day. Sir.